Okey-doke. Hello, and welcome to Clearly Aligned Podcast. We're on number 5. I'm Kelly Tyrrell, and I'm here with founder Dr. Stephen Schalk. Today's topic is Delivery Day. How are
Yeah,
you, Dr. Schalk?
I'm good. Just Kelly and I have been going through this, but background for everybody else. This podcast has taken a lot of time to get to here. I think we rescheduled 5 times, with both of us having times where we either forgot about it or missed times, and then an hour of problem solving before we start even. So let's hope that it's good.
We hope your delivery day has been easier than ours.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Let's just start off. I've been following you around the earth. It seems
Yeah,
like
pretty much.
we were recently in California, LA, and San Francisco on our Beyond the Borders like little tour. So I learned lots seeing you live. So that was amazing, and so many great doctors, obviously, and audience members. So many women. The front row was all women. Just
I
saying,
know.
like
All
top
women
level doctors.
diamond providers too. I know.
Yeah, who've been following you for some time. A lot of diamonds and huge like airway doctors. I have so much to learn even from that front row. So I
Oh
was
yeah.
thrilled to be part of that. And yeah, now we have a lot of
And
that was
Vancouver.
a big group, right?
Yeah, that was. We had I think like about 150 in San Fran, 80 or
Yeah.
so in Los Angeles, and then we were in Vancouver before that.
Yeah, yeah. So it's been fantastic. And a lot of you have joined and signed up for our core courses or individual courses that you haven't, that you started off and did foundations. So now you're reaching out to do biomechanics or mix. So we're excited that you're excited
Yeah.
and following along. So it's
Yeah.
crazy. We're
It
busy.
is. It's busy.
And I haven't
But
got to all your emails. I just saw an email yesterday saying I'm missing emails, but I'm catching you. I mean, people are reaching out Facebook and directly, and there's so many. You're
carrier
coming at me from
pigeon.
all angles,
I
so
know, right?
I'll get there.
We'll all get there eventually.
Awesome. So today we're talking about delivery day. We've kind of been strategically and methodically working our way up to this with our past podcasts. So at this point, we're going to jump off as if our ClinCheck has been approved. You've taken those kind of ClinCheck notes and those treatment notes and put them into your dental software so that the team is, got their little Bible, as Dr. Schultz calls it, and knows exactly what this treatment is about, whether there's elastics involved, et cetera, what the rotation is, if dental monitoring is involved. And we're getting ready for this case to arrive. So maybe I'll just ask you, Dr. Schulk, like the preparation for when a case arrives, or like FedEx, is it? No, it's UPS here in Canada. When
UPS.
UPS, yeah, when UPS delivers the case, is there anything that happens right at that point? Like, does your admin team log it, or how does your team know it's in the building?
Sure. So yeah, we have a system, and I think you could set it up kind of in whatever makes the most sense for your clinic. But when the trays arrive, we go ahead and we have them put on a specific shelf. That is
Okay.
the like arrived shelf where it hasn't been redistributed to wherever it needs to finish up. And so that will then go ahead and when the staff has time, allow them to move the cases that are restart cases. So what I mean by that for doctors listening is that when you are on a second batch of aligners or a third batch of aligners, right? Sometimes that is something that confuses doctors. They'll be like, well, what do you mean there's second batch or third batch? We kind of always plan that we're going to have more than one set of aligners. So if the patients finish that first batch, now they're on to a new batch, then we don't always need an appointment for that patient to get that second set of trays. So those trays get moved into a certain spot where the administrators can go ahead and give them to the patients. If it's a case that needs just like one or two attachments put on,
Mm-hmm.
then we put that in a separate area. And if it's a brand new start, we put it in a third area. Because the brand new starts, those we want to go ahead and we usually will preload the trays before the patient arrives. Whereas if
Awesome.
it's just one attachment going on, then we don't. And if it's someone who obviously is just picking them up, then we just give them a phone call and they swing by to grab the trays, try them in the waiting room, and then they're right back into treatment again.
Fantastic. Yeah, I worked pretty similarly in the past. The exception, our admin team, because they're typically the ones at the front desk when UPS arrives, is they just make a quick note, like right in our schedule, because our patients are all pre-booked. So we have a bit of a difference there. You're new. Are you new patients at least pre-booked for like four
We've
weeks
gone kind
later?
of every direction. We used to pre-book a lot, and then we kind of moved away from it. New patients we generally pre-book.
Okay.
It's more the patients who are in treatment. We try to keep
Right.
those ones available so that we can very like quickly and easily bring the patients in when they need to come in, and base it
Okay.
on the tray number, not necessarily how many weeks it's going to be.
Okay. Yeah, we just in the appointment book itself, just beside their name, as that case comes in, they just are getting rid of all the external boxing. They'll just make a note, trace have arrived, just so that us in
Right.
the clinic, we're all like, at least they're in the building.
Yes.
And that's that. And we have done the same thing. We've converted like a full closet for our aligners, not to keep them. We only keep them temporarily until we see the patient, and then we give them all away. But they all are housed in that area with a little sticky number with their insert date. So it's a little bit organized.
Yeah.
And then we do the exact same thing. They are brought back into the clinic for the preloading stage, which I'm a huge supporter of. It might not make sense to you at this point if you're just a beginner and you just have, one or two patients and you have lots of time because you're giving yourself like 2 hours to
Yeah.
deliver an Invisalign case. But it's a great habit to get into, to preload your trays. And by that, we mean fill them up with the attachment glue ahead of time. And I guess we could kind of just explain that a little bit. You pre-spray yours with like a food grade silicone.
Yeah. Yeah. So just if you go on like Amazon and just Amazon search food grade silicone, or you can also use like PAM, right?
Yeah,
Just something that is going to prevent the attachments from sticking too much to the trays. It makes it a little easier once you've gone ahead and you've cured the attachments in the patient's mouth and you're ready to take the trays off. If you have something that kind of greases the interface between the attachments and the tray. And I get
yeah,
asked, does that affect the bond? But it doesn't affect the bond strength because the part of the attachment that's touching the tooth has not come in contact with the food grade silicone or the PAM. So you
right.
just spray the inside of the trays. And just to give background, probably for those who, as you're explaining the preloading, Kelly likes, like we do, we like using packable composite and then loading those trays before the patient arrives. So then you go ahead and you put all the composite in the trays. And then did you do the same thing, Kelly? How did you make sure that the trays didn't cure from light exposure?
So yeah, in the early days when I was a little bit newer and preloading was like making us nervous, we used to preload them. We used to put them in a black mouthguard case, and we like even taped out the holes, and we used to put them in the fridge and with their name, and it was like completely ridiculous when we figured out that that is totally not necessary.
Yeah.
So we just put them right back into their template sleeve. And we just put them under that first 16 aligners. Usually it's 16 in that box. So we put them underneath there to hide them, and that's that. And honestly, we usually do that a couple days before their appointment, or an Invisalign champion or a liner champion or whoever they are is doing this kind of prep work for the clinician. And so she'll get them all loaded and put away. And again, it's usually a day or two before, whenever she has time. She'll work days ahead. And if the patient happens to cancel, it doesn't happen that often because this is their big day oftentimes, but if it's a refinement, sometimes it'll restart, it will slip their mind, and in that case we just put them back on the shelf, and we don't pry them all out and reload it's I don't think it's ever been a problem.
Yeah, not for
I'm
us
sure if you
either.
left it for months maybe, but who knows, right?
Well, here's
It's
how
a
I think of it.
fantastic idea. And I
Yeah.
think it also um allows for a little bit more precision in loading. And so again, with the packable, you have a video, so you have like the gun and you kind of like push it in and micro brush and kind of like pack it in or whatever. With the packable, I tend to scoop off. We don't have the gun, but I scoop off little chunks. So if it's a big attachment, a bigger chunk, and I roll it on my glove like into a ball, and then I just transfer it
Oh.
in and pack it down. I have used flowable for years as well, and that also does not cure or run out. You think it's
I was
flowable,
gonna
it's not
ask,
running
do
anywhere.
you find the
And you
flowables
just
okay?
slightly overfill it. It's almost like if you fill a glass of water or milk or whatever, and it's got like that little curve, that meniscus, I think it's called
Yeah,
officially,
meniscus. Yeah.
but that kind of thing. So you're overfilling it slightly because you don't want a deficit or a bubble. It's always better to have a little bit of flash to remove, in my opinion, than to have a deficit or like an undercut, because then we end up cheating and backfilling it.
Yeah.
Guilty as charged.
Can you
But
explain that for the doctors listening right now? What you mean by cheating and backfilling?
yeah. So if your assistant, like your champion who's preloading, or if you're doing it yourself, if you don't put enough flowable or packable in and you're curing it against a tooth, and so it's either not enough of material or you haven't pushed that template against the tooth as you're curing it, so it's set away from the tooth. What happens is when you peel it off and you're hopefully with your black light at first just assessing your work, you'll notice little bubbles. It's like little air bubbles that are popped, or it's like a canyon, like where the tooth surface and the attachment is, you'll notice like a gap. And it's not really all bonded to the tooth, but it's there. And with your fingernail, you're kind of like, it's kind of there. And you're, kind of like, oh, darn it, I should click that off and redo the whole thing. But what we often do is I will take a little bit more Assure Plus is my favorite bond. I will microbrush and add a tiny bit more Assure. I'll make sure it's dry. It is dry anyways, but I'll add a little bit more Assure, and I will backflow it with my composite, making sure like I'm just filling it in. And almost always that works. But again, I don't want to leave any air bubbles because that's what's going to stain. And the next visit, patient's going to be like, oh, what are these little, stain bubbles from coffee getting underneath the attachment? So to solve that problem, overfilling a little bit and taking off that extra flash, please take off that extra flash, because once you've taken like Dr. Schalk's attachment and biomechanics course and you realize how important these attachments are in the interface of the plastic to the tooth, to the attachment, if you just leave a big lump of garbage around your attachments, you're just sabotaging the whole thing. So
Totally.
Train your team to be very specific with that.
Yeah, for anybody listening right now who doesn't know what flash is essentially the term we use for any extra composite. This is funny. My partner in the practice, he was doing some Invisalign when I first started, and he told me, he's like, I've got this secret for how I make sure my attachments never fall off. My secret is I overfill all of my attachments, and then when I put them on, I've got extra composite helping hold that attachment on so that it's going to stick right on. But the problem is that, and I cover this in attachments and biomechanics in that course, that you need to have the trays engaged and adapted against the buccal surface of the teeth really nicely. If you have all that extra composite that pushes the tray away from the buccal of the tooth, then you don't have a nice tight interface between them. And the movements that you get are going to be less efficient, or they're not going to happen at all. So exactly. Yeah, like Kelly said, always make sure that you clean up that extra composite around the attachments, or else the interface isn't good and you're going to run into problems.
And if you're loading your own trays, which often you do as a new provider, because you want to be involved in the initial steps, and that's fine. Eventually you'll pass the torch. I hope you pass the torch and delegate it to someone. I would encourage you to have that person who's loading the trays to be chairside with you initially. You don't need to say anything. You don't need to critique their work, because we just don't do that in Canada. We just don't say too much or whatever. They can see with their own eyes if there's bubbles, if there's undercuts, if it didn't stick, or if it just went totally over the incisal edge. That's how I trained my assistants. I just had them chairside with me only for that 5 minutes where I was actually bonding and was peeling it off, and they learned. And then soon enough, like, there was never any. It's just they get to that perfect amount. They're just really, really good at it. Once in a while, they go a little, happy or whatever. But for the most part, like, it's really good just to, with everything, self-assess your work. So it's a task anyone can do. You don't need to be super highly skilled, really.
Yeah.
So that's fantastic. So that's one part of, I would say, like, presetting or preloading for your day. And the whole idea here is that you're making the patient's time in the chair and also for your clinic more efficient. So you can reduce the chair time, but also improve the patient experience. They're leaned back. They're not waiting for you to fill things or, fiddling around with tools. You can really get them bonded in, 15 minutes or less, probably definitely less for a full mouth. And Dr. Schalk and I like our attachments. So we're like 7 to 7.
Yeah, lots of attachments. So yeah, I like what you say there, because a lot of doctors will kind of say, well, it's harder to use packable composite, or it takes longer. But what Kelly touched on, which is so important, is that I don't really care if it takes longer if it's not chair time, right? Mm-hmm. If someone cancels and we have time in our schedule, then that's a great opportunity to fill and load the trays so that when the patient comes, they're ready to go and you're not spending 5 or 6 minutes. Let's say you prefer flowable because you find it faster and you normally do it chairside. Well, if you're wasting 6 minutes of a 60-minute appointment filling your trays chairside with the patient there, that to me is an inefficiency that affects your profitability. You are
Mm-hmm.
10 times, you're 1/10 less efficient than if you had preloaded those trays.
Exactly.
And so, Kelly, can you talk a bit more on, you mentioned that you'll preload with flowable. I've actually
Yeah.
never done that before. How do you find that?
Yeah, 100%. It's the same. So when I transitioned from one ortho specialty office to another, both diamond, so like high amounts of
Yeah. For
Invisalign,
anybody
and
listening, that's like
the previous
280
one
cases a
was
year.
packable, and then my current one used flowable. And so of course initial resistance from the hygienist who thinks she knows it all, but I adapted. And yeah, it does not cure any more easily. Does it wear down a little bit more easily because it's less filled? Possibly, but honestly, across the board, and I see a lot of scans all the time, like from different offices. All of our attachments are the edges are getting smoothed and whatever. So I wouldn't say I notice a huge difference. And yeah, so we preload partly because it's easy, partly because it's just a preference. We do always use the radio pake. Yeah, radio pake product. Whether some of us will check it all the time with the light and some of us won't. But I do find having that black light for flash specifically, but also just that the shape is good. And also for debonds, don't underestimate that black light on debonds because that's that thin layer of plastic on their teeth or composite on their teeth. And sometimes they'll come back because they feel like a tiny little edge. And with the black light, you just need to shine it over and you know exactly what you've missed. So you're not taking off too much or too little or scratching the enamel. We use high speeds with burrs, composite burrs, or whatever in Ontario for sure. So, it's just an easy way to know that you've just taken off the right amount and haven't left anything behind.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about, you touched on the black light. So I'll go ahead and just give a bit of information for those listening. What Kelly's
Yeah.
referring to with the black light, because I know some of you have taken the courses and some of you haven't, but the black light is referring to essentially just a flashlight that you can buy on Amazon. And you can just search like black light flashlight.
Mm-hmm.
And what this allows you to do is that this flashlight will light up certain types of composite. And those composite types then will show up as being fluorescent under the black light. And then that way you can go ahead and see what Kelly was saying is two different things. One is remove the extra flash, so that extra little bits of composite that the patient will notice and will cause the trays not to seat properly. And then second of all, when you're taking off all of your attachments, it's so much faster and more efficient if you can see exactly what's tooth and what's composite. When you first start, you really don't know. Like, it's hard to have the feel between what is what. At
Mm-hmm.
this point now, like, we've gotten to the point that like I could probably take off attachments. I don't want to say with
Blind.
my eyes closed, but because I need to actually see the difference of how the like composite flakes off the tooth. But
Yeah.
it's just so much easier if you have that black light. It's dummy proof.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's only certain types of composite that actually light up. So it's just important to make sure you have the right type of composite. And we kind of go through all of the protocols and details and like how to like the product listings of which types of composite work and the black light. That's all covered in the foundational systems course as well. So everything we're talking about right now is covered in much more detail.
Mm-hmm. One of my orthodontists, Dr. Dion, who I work with very closely here in Canada, he introduced me to same idea. It's a little black light. It's like this little tiny light, and it can clip on your glasses or your shield. And it has like an awesome spectrum. Like it's pretty intense and it's tiny. And every single team member on his team has to have one
Huh.
always on their thing. And so it's fantastic because I mean, I'm like an octopus because we don't have an assistant. Like,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't have my own person. So I've got like my high speed, I've got my suction, I've got my flashlight in one hand, and like the
Yeah.
little wrist strap half the time is dangling on their face. I'm doing like all these kinds of things. So that little black light is a godsend, the little clip on. So I'll share that too where he got it from. It's
Yeah.
cheap, it's not expensive.
I've tried looking for those before, and
Oh,
I was talking to like some Chinese companies about making like a cover to go over your loop light. Like if you could just have a
yeah.
cover that would go down.
That would be good too.
But if you have someone like that, I would love, love,
Yeah,
love
I'll share
details
that
on
with
that.
you
Yeah.
and see.
We'll post that on the
So
Facebook
that's
page
fantastic.
too.
So we've got it loaded, we've got it put it back in the sachet, and we've got it just back underneath and put on your shelf or whatever. Ours, once we've got them back in the clinic, we actually had a custom made cabinet made. Invisalign better not change their boxes. No, it's fine. They're like cubby holes, and it can basically fit two patients 3 stacks high because we do complex cases, so there's kind of a lot of aligners there. And we're all into like prepared environment, kind of like super Montessori school. And so we have our aligner champion go ahead, open up their ClinCheck or the paper. We don't really use the paper that much anymore, but basically she'll open up the ClinCheck, run through it, and she'll do the same thing, like the little Bible notes on a sticky. So, 40 active aligners, 4 passive, no overcorrection, class 2 elastics from day 1. So that means we need 2 Kaplan hooks or 2 little silver buttons to bond. So she'll go ahead and already take those buttons out. We never preload the buttons with actually ortho glue. That will set, so don't do that. But she'll go ahead and write these little notes and just stick it to the outside of the box. So what that does for me as a clinician, I used to do that myself before every patient. I would quickly run through their thing and gather all this data. I had my little treatment notes that were transferred, but I'm still just kind of getting my head in the game. Is it mandibular advancement? Is it a carrier protocol? What am I dealing with? But now I just have a sticky note and I trust her. And
Yeah.
so I'm just like, okay. And so basically I don't have to think. So that also saves me chair time. And all I need to do is take the tray that she set up, also prepared. And so it's prepared based on what that patient needs and who I am. So I use an Optragate. I know you use NOLA, and we have a lot of providers who use NOLA. So based on whoever's delivering, she'll set up that tray with exactly what we want for that bond procedure. She'll put the 2 Kaplan hooks, usually a third in case we drop one on the floor. So basically, it's just so streamlined. All I have to do is grab that patient's tray, and it's all wrapped and covered and whatever, and grab those boxes, and I can just set it up. And by the time I call my patient back to the chair, pretty much everything I need unwrapped that I'm allowed to unwrap is unwrapped. And I just save so much time doing that. And then I can just get right down to it with the patient.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're in the chair. So usually what I do you want me to just say what I do, and then
Yeah, sure.
you probably, I guess you know what your team does. You think you
Yeah.
know what your team does. The key here is the team. If you have the ability to delegate to your team, doctors, do it. Take the leap. You don't need control over bonding these little plastic bumps to the teeth. Like, honestly, right? If it's legal, it's
Well,
legal.
that's a caveat. Two things I'd say first. Make sure that in your jurisdiction, because someone asked me this when I was in California, that your assistants can do what we're describing. So I practice
Yes.
in Alberta. Kelly practices in Ontario. Assistants who've taken a specific module are able to do the bonding of attachments to the teeth as well as the buttons in both of those jurisdictions. And in Ontario, hygienists who've taken the course can do it. So it's like a weekend course. And then they have this as an expanded skill. But I know people who are listening in other places in Canada or the States, that might not be the case. But in a lot of places, they do have the ability to do that if they've taken their courses. And in some states, I know they can do it without even needing to have taken a course.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, definitely double check. Removing is one of the things that is removing with a high speed for sure, but even removing in general, I know a lot of my orthodontists have to put some extra chair time in the States where we don't have that problem in Canada. But yeah, worth checking for sure.
Although, just to clarify, I do actually take off all my own attachments. With a high
Oh,
speed, the
wow.
assistants are not allowed to use a high speed in Alberta with a
In
flame
high
burr.
speed.
So I remove them, but the assistants can remove the attachments with a round burr. It's not as
Okay.
comfortable for the patients. I know we're getting
No,
on a tangent,
bumpy.
but they could go ahead and use a round burr and then use like a polishing cup afterwards to polish. Those are all fine because
Okay.
it's on a slow speed. But
Can a hygienist in Alberta, or maybe just it's a restorative?
no,
No.
well, yes,
Really?
actually, if it's a restorative hygienist, they would be able to use the high speed with a polishing burr. So you're right.
Yeah.
Restorative hygienist could.
Okay, awesome. I just have to
Yeah.
stay away from the diamond burrs. I'm like, never put a
Gotcha.
silver burr on my tray.
Yeah, we don't use the diamond burrs. We use I know there's different philosophies about using a fine grit diamond We just go right to like a flame burr for cleaning up attachments as well as like cleaning up flash. I would say there's two different ways you do it. You either use a football burr, is what we would use, or I guess a flame burr, or I actually prefer using like a 4 round, going around the attachments and cleaning the flash with a small round, even like grabbing like a 4 round, a 3 round, something in there, 5 round.
It's nice around the like the gingival because with a flame, it's just a hard
It's a
angle
hard
to get around
angle.
that
It
gingival with a
is.
straight burr. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
awesome. Okay, so like this is what I do. So I'm like super competitive about chair time because if you can save time, you're basically you can save like 10 or 15 minutes off every bonding appointment or even debonding appointment. You've basically created like another hour appointment that is another start or finish appointment, which is like so valuable in any practice, but especially in ortho specialty where we only work Monday to Thursday and like 8 to 4 or whatever. So we have like, and we never want to extend that. So we really are trying to pack more people into the same hours. So basically, when I bring my patient back, I basically don't, I want to make it super fun. This is their first day. They are so excited. They have invested a lot of time, future time and money into this. So I want it to be their, special start day. So I'm usually like super pumped up, so excited for them. I'm sure
Kelly,
my team members
excited?
aren't as excited as I'm excited 8 times a day. And that's not even the debond appointments, but it's the first time for them. So I do my best. And so what I do is I do show them their clin check, partly because I want them to be my partner. I want them to understand what's going on. Sometimes, we do heroic things on the clin checks, and I just explain that to them. People usually get it, but that's fine. And so I walk them through their plan without going into too much detail. We're going to put these bumps on. There's going to be a little bit of slimming down between your teeth or polishing between your teeth or slenderizing between your teeth, all nice words for IPR. I let them know if there's going to be multiple sessions of IPR. Usually there isn't, but if there is, I want to let them know that's a plan. It's not a mistake. And then I do point out in their trays, anything that's out of the ordinary or where we want to stop or where IPR might be. And we have a sticker system, same as you, where we would pop on like a slim down sticker if IPR is planned at stage 20. I'm going to book them appropriately so that they don't get to stage 20. But if they cancel it visually, they're going to know, okay, stop. Kelly told me this slim down appointment's coming, or stop in general. I have to stop here and get a new scan. So that's, again, part of the preparation that our aligner champion is doing for us. Those stickers are already on. I don't mess with that.
And just to
But I just
clarify
kind of run them through.
for
Sorry?
doctors who don't know about the stickers you're talking about, can you give a bit of info about how stickers work and what that refers
Yeah.
to?
So trial and error, we've all made the mistakes because we've been doing this a while, where we've ordered overcorrection aligners where we've like over rotated teeth or overdone movements, knowing that sometimes they fall short. So we don't want them to get to those overcorrection until we assess them chair side. Or virtual C chain is a tight squeeze of the teeth, where we're anticipating loose contacts between the teeth because we've done this so many times. We always end up with loose contacts. So now we're thinking ahead. But we want the patient to stop at that last active aligner so that we can floss and check before they have this tight squeeze in case it's unnecessary. Because if you have perfectly aligned teeth that have no space and then you add these overcorrection aligners or virtual C chain aligners and squeeze them, actually you are crumpling their teeth up, and that's a problem. And we've all delivered those aligners by mistake. And the patient comes back and they were like 3 weeks ago, they were amazing. They were super straight. And then this happened. And then you figure out that you've delivered these tight squeeze aligners, and you have to kind of backtrack from that. So to prevent that problem, we created like stickers. So stop stickers are highly valuable for any reason, but stop definitely at the last active aligner before you even get to those tight squeeze aligners. Stop here because I want to have an in-office visit because you have like slim down, you have IPR. Stop. Sometimes you need a mid-treatment attachment to go on because you've either missed that, the technicians have put that on for you not by mistake, but you just didn't catch it.
Sometimes.
Or you have a really rotated tooth and you couldn't put it on at the beginning. And so you have to put it on at tray 15. And so you want to have like a visual reminder to the patient adding a speed bump here. We call the little composite buttons speed bumps for the kids anyways. So we have these little stickers that we've developed over time that work for us. And as well as we have a waterproof sticker that's just branded to our office with the contact information that we put on their aligner case and definitely their retainer case at the end, because that's 2 different delivery days. Because every time they take that out of their lunchbox or their purse or their pocket, it's branding our office, and it's free. It's almost free. It's only the cost of the sticker. So that's just like a really good move. And so stickers are amazing.
And so, Kelly, can you talk a little bit about, because you have created actually a stop sticker system that doctors can just purchase, so they don't need to create their own. Like, we did this independently kind of like years ago, around the same time you were probably doing them too. We went and like designed them at Vistaprint and paid a graphic designer to mock something up for us. But you actually have stickers that they can just straight up buy. How can they find those?
So yeah, it's maximum60.ca. Well, you can put it in the link
Sorry,
after. But
maximum.
basically, my husband is a brand developer, and he works a
Yeah.
lot with orthodontists and pharma companies and whatever. And so obviously, I'm his wife who talks nonstop about Invisalign at the time. And so we were encountering these problems. He probably got sick of hearing it. And so we came up with this system. And again, they're really inexpensive. You can buy them individually. So if you only need the stop stickers now, you don't need the other ones because you don't even know what overcorrection means and you're not in that boat. You just order what you want. A lot of orthodontists, I mean, it's a regular thing. They're definitely ordering the branded ones for their cases because that just makes sense. So stop in the cases are highly, highly valuable IPR. Virtual, we have a whole virtual range. A lot of us are using dental monitoring. So it's just in those first few weeks to remind, especially younger patients, like, hey, take a selfie, check in with us, those types of things. You only need to have those stickers, every 7 to 12 aligners to remind them to do those things until it becomes a habit. And then the stickers aren't
Yeah.
needed
And
anymore.
Kelly, what's the website for it?
So it would be maximum60.ca.
I'm just going to pull that up.
Yeah.
Maximum60.ca. Okay.
Yeah. Does it come up? Do I even know my own website? Max60.ca.
I'll just double check this, make sure.
It should be on there.
Maximum60.
I'm sure it's highlighted unless it's hidden by.
It's not pulling up right
You
now,
can't see the
but
stickers there.
no, it's not showing up on mine as maximum60.ca. But what we'll do is we'll go ahead and put this in the show notes for anybody interested in buying these stickers. But they're great. They make things so much clearer for the patients. And what I really like about it is it creates accountability, because the patient can't show up and say, well, I used every single one of my trays. How was I to know that I wasn't to continue? If you're like, well, no, you had a stop sticker on tray number 18 that said, stop, it's time for an appointment. And you didn't listen to that. We needed to go ahead and do some smoothing between your bottom teeth. And that's why things now are off track. Because we didn't do that, the teeth moved improperly. And it just puts some accountability back on the patient. And what we were talking about a little earlier is that at our office, we don't pre-book all the appointments. We wait till the patient gets close to that stop sticker, and we have 2 different ones. We have a stop sticker, like let's say we're doing IPR at tray number 20. We'll have a stop sticker at tray number 18 that tells them, and assume they're changing once a week, that'll tell them that they need an appointment coming up, so to contact our office and we'll book them in. It allows us to keep our schedule very flexible, but I know that a lot of offices are booked out for a long time and you don't have room for those. So it's totally okay to go ahead and just pre-book them for all their appointments. But what we found is sometimes patients weren't wearing their trays as much as they should have, or they would have gone a bit too fast, and things are fitting. Or they took longer and they wore a tray maybe for 2 weeks instead of 1 week because they went to Europe and they didn't bring enough trays. So they're showing up and they need to do IPR at tray number 20, and then they're actually on tray number 16. And the contacts haven't finished moving. The teeth haven't finished moving. So the contacts aren't available to do IPR easily between those contacts. So that's why we kind of stopped associating appointments with certain time frames and more so what tray number they were on. But
Okay.
again, there is definitely some logistical aspects that it means more communication touch points with the patient. Um, but either way, you use the stop stickers, whether it's just to remind the patient and make sure they don't blow through all their trays. Because the other thing that Kelly and I both do that you've kind of probably, or for anybody listening right now, has kind of alluded to is that we give them all their trays, because having 400 patients, there's no way in the world that we would be able to hold on to all of those trays for every patient. We would need a separate storage facility. And so we give
Mm-hmm.
the patients all their trays, but this is how we make sure that they know not to go through all of those trays. So it just makes things a lot more efficient, but you need to have those systems in place or else the patient just blows through all of their trays.
Awesome. Okay, so we are set. Again, I very quickly, when the patient's in the chair, I run through the tray setup. And the reason I do that, and I do it very quickly, but I basically do not want them to talk or interrupt me because I am like literally on the clock. No one's rushing me. But yeah, I just want to get it done. So I just quickly run through like, hey, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to have cheek retractors. I'm going to use this blue thing, not a needle, it's just a gel, tastes like lemons. I know it doesn't taste good. It'll be over quick. I'm gonna let you rinse at the end. Like, do not interrupt me. Basically, my point here. With I thought I say it very nicely. I just tell them like, after the blue stuff, I'm gonna give your teeth a shower, a little bit of glue. I'm gonna put the trays in. I'm gonna peel them out. Our office doesn't have the silicone. We've never sprayed them, but I do know that they stick to the tray. Sometimes I wonder if it's because I'm over curing. I'm melting the tray to my attachments. I don't know. These things cross my mind. But what I do is, once I basically have walked through the tray so that they know exactly what I'm doing, I lean them back and just say, you're going to be back for like 10 minutes, probably 10 minutes for full arches. And that way they kind of got it in their head what they're up, what's going to happen. And as they see things coming towards them, they're like, okay, well, here's the shower, here's the taste. I get it. And so typically I bond the full mouth at a time. I do the whole thing. And I start with the lower because that's got the highest risk for contamination, saliva contamination. And so I have 4 cotton rolls and an Optigate. That's like my setup. And so I place the Optigate, I put 2 cotton rolls by the tongue, dry everything off, etch everything. And I always etch in the same area, like the right posterior molar all the way around, assuming I have attachments on every tooth, which I don't always, but let's just assume. So right to left, and then I go up to the top and I'm putting etch everywhere. I am holding in my left hand the first aligner tray. And the reason I'm doing that is I'm looking to see where are my attachments. Is there one lingual? Is it buccal? Like, where is it angled? I don't mind putting extra etch on. I really don't, because I can take it off myself. So I'm not causing the doctor extra time or anyone to come chair side. If that was the case, I would probably stay very particular, but I'm just putting etch on. But I just want to make sure I put it everywhere, including the areas that I'm going to need to bond elastic hooks. But that helps by holding that first aligner tray, not the template, because it's preloaded, right? So you don't want it to cure. And so I do that. By the time I've added all the etch to the upper arch, I'm ready to rinse the lower. Rinsing is like really important to me, 10 seconds per tooth. And I literally count out loud because I'm a fast talker and I do everything kind of fast. That's one area I don't skimp. And so I start rinsing and rinse the top. And then I dry everything, and then I replace my cotton rolls. So and I've got to 4 cotton rolls now. And then add my Assure to the bottom, but I don't add my Assure or my Bond primer, whatever you want to call it, to the top, because I want to double check that it's still frosty when I get to the upper arch. So I add my little bit of Assure to the bottom, place my attachment template, which by the way has been sitting on my tray outside of the box, outside of the wrapper, and it's under an orange shield. It's like a
Yeah.
rectangle orange shield.
Yeah, it's like a light protector. In the
Yeah.
attachments, I'll see if we can find the link for the show notes here for doctors.
Yeah, because
But
that's super handy because it's preloaded, but now it's been sitting on my tray,
yeah,
even if it's been sitting there for 20 minutes, definitely before the patient got in there. And by the way, I've also now, before the patient got into the operatory, I've also now buttered my trans bond or ortho glue onto the back of my elastic buttons. So silver buttons, ceramic buttons, whatever they are, those have now been preloaded. I don't even load those chairside.
Right.
Those are perfectly fine under the orange shield as well. And so once I place the template on the lower, I grab my curing light and I do a couple of things. I either grab my scaler or my fingernail, or I use my cotton plier and I wrap a couple little elastic, ortho elastics around it just so it's not slippery, because I really am pushing kind of hard and I don't want it to
Oh,
slip off the
that's a
teeth.
good tip.
And yeah, and like the reason I'm doing that is you really want that template, that attachment you preloaded, to really be right up against the tooth when you're
Yeah.
curing. Otherwise, you're curing it away from the tooth, which doesn't make sense. And I want kind of pressure on both sides. And then I have a free hand. I'm kind of blocking all the other attachments as I go. So I cure
Yeah.
from the
Yeah.
distal, most distal, all the way forward, all the way back, and kind of try to protect the others from the light until I have some pressure against them. And then once I've done that, let's just assume we have elastic set up, because a lot of our cases do. You have those windows that are cut out. So I've already pre-etched that area. I already have the Assure on. Just for overkill, I usually add a little bit of extra Assure there, just in case. And that's when I'll add those Kaplan hooks or little silver buttons or whatever to the back. And then I leave that be. And then I move up to the upper and I dry. I just double check, am I still frosty? Add my Assure and do the exact same thing. And then peeling it off is obviously a little harder for me because I haven't done the silicone states. It's not
It's not
horrible,
bad.
but what I do is I take that same scaler, and on the buckle, I just tease it away from the tooth. So I can see or hear like a little bit of a pop. So I know it's released before I go to the inside. The very distal of the terminal molar on the lingual is where you always want to click, and then peel it off. And if you've already pre-loosened it because you've either used the silicone spray or you've teased it away from the teeth, you're going to find the removal is just so much easier.
Yeah, really great pearls here. I'm learning things too, actually. I'll say the things that I haven't done and that I'm like, oh, that's good. I like that you hold the bottom tray while you're etching, or the top tray, to kind of see where the attachments are, rather than looking at the sheet or having the ClinCheck on a computer behind you. Being able to hold that tray in one hand while you're kind of etching, I think that's really slick. I'll give something that we do, and as well as putting like a little elastic on your finger just so when you're pushing, because sometimes the tray is really slippery.
Or on the cotton pliers, because those are the only tools that we have
Yeah.
on the tray apart from drills are a scaler
Yeah.
or some kind of pushing instrument. Doesn't necessarily, but your scaler is handy. Scaler, mirror, and cotton plier.
Yeah.
Like Invisalign is so light
Yeah, you don't need
on
much.
instruments. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
I'll give some insights to doctors, because I think what's super cool about the podcast is we come at things with like two different worldviews, because Kelly's worked in high production ortho clinics with the systems completely dialed in. And then on my side, starting as a general practitioner, like I remember doing my first case was 2017, and I placed all my own attachments and I did everything myself in the beginning, which I know a lot of you guys are going to be too. And also, I'll just say it, like, I'm not as good as Kelly when it comes to doing attachment setups. So I'll give you some advice and tips here for if you're brand new and you're like, well, that sounds great, but I'm not as good as Kelly. So what I'll do actually with trays is I won't necessarily bond everything at once, because I find I'm not good enough with the saliva contamination. And so what I'll do is, I find, like Kelly said, the terminal molars are the ones that get the most saliva on them. I like to start on the upper. So I'll go ahead and I'll etch all the uppers. And like Kelly said, either with like an obfuscate, or if you're using a NOLA, and that's a different type of isolation system. And so we'll go ahead and I'll etch all of the teeth and I'll bond all of the teeth. But let's say that I realize that this is a teenager who has a small mouth and I'm worried about their cheeks touching those bonded areas. I'll go ahead and I'll cut the trays into 3 pieces. So I'll cut them kind of like distal to the canines and just cut them into those 3 pieces. And then I'll go ahead and try to get the distal sections on as quickly as possible, just so once they're on, now the saliva is not going to be touching from the buccal. It could still seep under the trays, but I'll try and get those on. And what I'll do a bit differently is I'll just do a bit of a tack cure. So I'll go ahead and I'll cure for maybe 3 seconds. And like Kelly said, the keys are really to make sure that the trays are adapted really well against the teeth. And so I'll push from the occlusal with my finger, and I'll push really hard from the buccal with the curing light.
Okay.
Taking this back one step, what we do is I'll actually go in though, right when I put the attachment template on, I'll kind of push and I'll massage kind of all the attachments before, because Kelly was kind of talking about this, but when you are pushing against the, when you're curing the one tooth, the next one's going to start to get a little bit of ambient light and cure it.
Yeah.
And so I really like what you were mentioning there about how to try to block it out with your finger. So you're really only curing the one at a time. So what we do to kind of help out with that too is we go ahead and kind of massage all the attachments from the buccal before curing any of them. So however many are in kind of that section, whether we're doing the whole tray or we're doing a partial tray. Okay. And then that way they're kind of nicely adapted before we start any of the curing. And then I'll just tack cure for maybe like 3 seconds per tooth. And then we'll go ahead and I'll go to the other posterior template on the other side. And then I know the anterior is really easy to keep dry. So once I've got those on, then I know I can kind of like relax a little bit. If it's someone who's really good, I'll go ahead and just place all 3 of the section trays in at the same time and just cure everything if I've got lots of time and it's relaxed. There's no saliva contamination. And I'll do the same thing then if the patient looks really relaxed and good, I'll etch everything and bond everything at the same time. But that's kind of, that trick really helped me a lot when you'd have someone with a ton of saliva. So then we're going to the bottom arch again, cut the trays. You go ahead and you just get the attachments on, tack cure those back molars. So then that way you can come back and cure them for a good 10 or 15 seconds as you move through. We don't necessarily cure everything tremendously. Like we'll usually cure it for maybe like 5 to 10 seconds per attachment, because I find a lot of the ambient light cures the neighboring attachments. But you definitely, if you want to make sure that you're doing things like as thoroughly as possible, a few keys that I put into the steps that we haven't said is make sure that you etch, like Kelly said, for like at least 10 to 20 seconds. This takes me back to dental school, but I believe the proper amount of etching time for a cut tooth surface is like 15 seconds. You guys who've taken bonding courses would know those numbers better than I do. If you have a tooth that is really hard to bond to, I would etch it for longer, because it's uncut enamel. And so it needs a bit more time. If you have something that keeps falling off, I would etch it for like 30 seconds or 40 seconds or even a minute. Yeah. When you scrub the bond in, make sure you scrub it in really well. Don't just go ahead and like put the bond on, really like scrub it in on the tooth. And then make sure to dry. If you're using an ortho bond like Assure or ortho solo bond, you don't need to cure that bond before you place your attachments on. This is different from when we do fillings and you need to cure your bond. You don't have to cure it. And then one more little point is when you're doing buttons, if you're placing buttons for elastics, don't use dental composite. Make sure you're using actual ortho cement. And do you use Transbond too, Kelly?
I use Transbond. We use that like to bond brackets, carriers,
anything
buttons.
Metal. A lot of times I'll hear doctors saying, well, my buttons keep falling off. And then they'll say like, I put lots of flowable on. It's like, no, that's the problem, is that you don't want to use composite or flowable, packable or flowable for your buttons. You want to use specific ortho cement. It's much more dense. And so when you're taking it off, it's harder to get off at the end, but you really can see the difference in material. It's meant to glue things to the teeth, not to be used for fillings. So those are kind of all my little tips and tricks that I've kind of come across.
That's great. And I mean, it is very, very common in ortho specialty too, for people to section trays and do quadrants. It really is how that doctor or whoever has trained their team or what their comfort level is. And I'm sure even in our office, there are different clinicians doing it different ways. As long as you're successful, that's all that really matters. Also, again, the whole point here is don't be afraid to cut your template. It's a one use only, especially with Invisalign if you're using optimized attachments. Well, I shouldn't say one use only, but If you
Only
have
one
like an
use as a
anterior
full tray.
segment or a really like weird tooth, a blocked out tooth, you can literally cut an individual tooth. Like if I had crazy shark teeth where there's 3 teeth deep in the front and there's actually hardly any attachments on the front. Well, why am I going to try to seat that template when I'm struggling with saliva over all those crazy teeth? I'm going to cut those teeth out of the picture. So that would be a reason I would section my tray.
Good point.
Or if there was a very important attachment that I was worried wouldn't seat ideally, I would section the individual tooth out of it. And we used to, well, I save the attachment template and I actually keep it in office and we file them alphabetically. It's a real pain to go look for those. I'm not
No
going to
kidding.
lie. Most of the time, if an attachment falls off, we just reassess, is it vital? Is it not vital? By looking at the ClinCheck or asking the doctor who's planned it, is it a best supporting actor who is the anchor supporting the movement? Also important. But we will make a decision. Do we need to rebond it? We always err on the side of obviously kind of not rebonding it if it's not necessary. But if it is, we take that template um, either out of the alphabetical drawer. We just don't trust patients to keep it or bring it back. But I know we used to, and I know you do, you keep it and you put it like in their last box under their last tray. It's got a black line on it. It says template. And we used to ask our patients to bring all their things back in. Some did, some didn't. Our rule is just as long as you have the plastic in your mouth, that's really all I need to know if you're doing well. Is it fitting? You're probably, I don't know what day you change on. It's probably not today. Don't even care because it's not going to fit ideally. It's got bounce to it. So
Yeah.
I'm totally like the too much information, unless you haven't lost all your aligners. But if you don't have plastic in your mouth, don't even come to the door.
Yeah.
Like, what am I going to look at? It's just a conversation. It's like
Yeah.
a coffee chat. But yeah, template, I do like to save them. If you're not giving out all your aligners, then put it
Yeah.
back
Keep it
in, put
yourself.
it back in the bag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, one thing that we'll do, I'll kind of touch on a few things that you said there because I think you have a lot of interesting points. The first one was if I'll just take this back a step. If you take the attachment template off and one attachment has fallen off, it didn't stick. What I'll do is I'll usually cut the attachment template if I haven't already, and I just cut out that tooth and the tooth next to it. Just something to help it kind of like the tooth next to it helps it seat. But I don't really want to try and have to now like snap the whole template on over 16 attachments just to get that one attachment on. And I'm kind of struggling to get that flimsy template over it. I'd rather just cut that one tooth out and use that. And what Kelly's talking about when she said it's a one use only, what she means is you can only use the template as the full like tray,
full horseshoe,
uncut one time, because once the teeth start moving, let's say you're on tray 15, well, now that template's not going to fit because it's set to tray number 0. So if you have a patient who comes back and they've lost their attachment and you want to go ahead and glue a new one on, you can't use the same template. You can go ahead and order a new one from a line, which I would not recommend doing because it's a massive waste of time.
Yeah.
Instead, what you want to do is you go ahead and you just cut their template and cut out that one tooth, or in this case, you don't want to cut the neighboring tooth. You just cut the one tooth. Right. Because the 2 teeth have moved, so you only can cut the one tooth to almost create a crown form. Fill that with composite, bond it back onto the tooth, and you're good. What we do differently in our office, so Kelly's completely right that we found that patients would confuse their attachment template for a tray and get confused. So what we did is we took Ziploc bags and we just used a label maker and we made like 100 labels with our label maker, just saying attachment template, bring this to an appointment if a bump falls off.
Okay.
And so then we go ahead and we put that on the Ziploc bag, and then we go ahead and put the actual Invisalign bag with the cut up template that we might have cut up from our initial bond in that Ziploc, or in the actual attachment template bag, which then goes in the Invisalign bag. Okay, and then that way it's something kind of different. So we can show them, hey, this is what we use to put bumps back on. If you lose a bump, you need to bring it in. Awesome. And then, because I agree with you. Like, what a hassle trying to file 400 alphabetical attachment templates. And then what happens is I'm sure you run into this. You end up on a refinement. Oh yeah. And there's 2. There's like 5 different attachment templates in there from 5 refinements. And then like you need to spend almost like an entire day throwing away all the old ones from like 2018 that are still filed. And you never know what's current. And so you end up with just like all these old trays. and then someone throws away the wrong one anyways because they're cleaning them out,
Yeah.
and they throw away a current one and then they come back. So we finally kind of found that was a system we liked. And a little different again with how we do it is we found that giving the patient like a reusable grocery bag that we just
Okay.
went on Vistaprint.
Yep.
And you should get Rob to do that too, Kelly. You should get Rob to do, your husband, for those listening, to create like designs of like a grocery bag or something. So you could sell the stop stickers, the stickers for their actual case, and then also like a
The
branded
takeaway
grocery
bag.
bag. Yeah, because we have a big one. So we get them to put all their trays in that bag. And then we just tell them, look, leave them all in this bag somewhere. Like leave it in your bathroom or
Yeah.
like under the sink or somewhere. And then bring all your trays. We tell them that they can throw away all of their trays except for the last 3 trays.
Okay.
But I like for them to bring all their trays in because then it kind of just puts, like, we don't use them. We don't really need to do a lot to those trays usually. But it kind of puts the onus on them, like you said, that a lot of times patients don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
But if they show up without even having plastic on their teeth, so they show up to the
Yeah.
appointment and they don't have their aligners, it's like, well, you were supposed to actually have all of your trays with you here today. And you didn't
Yeah.
even bring the one that's in your mouth. Like, it's almost like we set the bar higher for what they need to do
Yeah.
because we
Yeah.
know they're always going to fall short of that. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why we have them bring all their trays. And then also just because sometimes you do have to go ahead and like cut or modify the
Yeah.
trays.
Cut or punch or fill a
Yeah.
pontic
And if
and
someone just came in like an hour through traffic or from out of town, and then you're like, oh, I need to like cut your trays. And they're like, oh, I didn't bring any of them. Then it's not it's not like I'm the one who's inconveniencing them.
yeah.
Instead, it's like, oh, well, you know, from our instructions, we need to have these trays every single time. That's really unfortunate.
Especially like when you get into growing smiles, like
Yeah.
erupting teeth, sabotage you very quickly. And you really want to avoid a refinement scan and replanning that whole ClinCheck modification process. It's fine to do it when we need to do it. But if you can just adjust your tray, I love that part. I love like problem
Yeah.
solving chairside and using hole punchers or aligner and pliers to fix things instead of aborting mission. So many people are like, oh, this tray's not tracking.
Yeah,
We see on
exactly.
not necessarily our Facebook, but we see it on other Facebooks, like, oh, whatever. And they're like, so I took a rescan. I'm like, oh my God, I would never scan for that.
Yeah,
I'm
keep
like,
it
that's
going.
fixable.
Totally.
So yeah, you learn. So sometimes, especially as you get into the teen and phase 1 leaning into phase 2, having their trays to show parent or to give them at least 1 or 2 or 3 aligners that you've kind of given them the idea of where they need to trim. Or for some families, you're just like, I better trim your trays because
Yeah.
you guys are
Yeah. It's
not
a
all
little bit
there.
too, yeah, it's a little too complicated for you to do it all. So we'll have to do it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
totally.
So that's that. And then, I mean, so we've got all the attachments on there. Obviously, we talked about removing flash. So let's just assume all the flash is gone. We put our black light on, they're good to go. So then the next step is really having them try in that first aligner. I usually do that for them just to make sure, because sometimes it is a struggle on crazy teeth.
Oh, yeah.
So I make sure I know how it's going to go on well. And then I demonstrate to them again how to remove it from the inside on the lingual. And for very complicated teeth or teeth that have a lot of attachments, they just want to pull it out. They're just like, go for it. And they're pulling.
Yeah,
And
they're grabbing from the buckle and they're just like reefing.
yeah. And you've done all that hard work to get those attachments on there. So I show them how to like unclick it, even from both sides on the inner, on the posterior. So click, and then peel. Usually you can just peel it. And I tell them, don't be afraid to break it. It's elastic. It's okay. But sometimes they do get stuck at a canine, like they peel it part way and then it's stuck. So then I just tell them, reach into the other side and then peel it that way, or click, and then actually go buckle to buckle, like cheek to cheek. Because really, when you think about it, it's the plastic unlatching from those big rectangular attachments that we place on. And once they do that, the side to side, it's not a problem. And I mean, within 3 days, they're experts.
Yeah,
so just
totally.
everyone calm down.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good point. First of all, telling them for the first couple days, it's going to be a little bit complicated, but I've never had a patient who's come in and not been an expert at removing their trays within 2 weeks, something like that. So within 3 days, you're going to be great at this. And I really like what you said there, because a lot of doctors don't know this. So I always say when I'm lecturing, for anybody who's fallen asleep, wake back up again for this one. But this is a great point that Kelly said. When you're taking the trays off and you're doing it from the lingual of the teeth, you want to kind of pull down a little bit to break the seal, but you also really want to push that into the cheek. You're pushing that buccally. And that's what kind of pops it off on the premolars and the maybe like
Mhm.
the first molar. So you're kind of pushing down a little bit, and you're pushing buccally, and really like getting that buccal seal broken with the premolars. Then it's really just sitting on, and if you do that both sides, it's just sitting on canine to canine. Then
Mhm.
you go ahead, and we will usually get them, like you said, either they kind of grab the one side and they kind of just pull, and it almost like peels off the rest of the anterior tooth
Yeah.
one at a time, or we just get them to grab both sides. So they use right
Mhm.
and left hand, they grab the back of the tray, and then they kind of just pull down and forward a bit, and it just
Okay.
pops off. And Kelly, I'm sure you've seen a million times, like patients, they just end up like they'll find their way. But the key
Yeah.
is just don't have them take out the tray from the buccal, because if
No.
their fingernail is rubbing against the mucosa or the gingiva, um, the buccal mucosa is much more likely to have recession than the palatal or the lingual. And so
Mhm.
that's just a really big thing we tell them is if your fingernail scrapes against the same spot every time you take them out for the next year, you can cause recession. So you need to use
Mhm.
your fingernails on the inside instead of on the outside.
Mhm. So yeah, definitely have them place it and remove it one time. Just that's like you don't want to skip that step.
Yeah.
If you have elastics, it's kind of a whole different conversation. And they also struggle with that, which makes sense. They're tiny little elastics. Men or teenage boys usually who have like sausage fingers, no fingernails, they're at a bit of a disadvantage. But again, you show them your way. I usually will show them my preferred way to do it, like stretch it, get it on that precision cut, or if it's a hook to hook, that's even easier, but get it on there, get it a little slimmer so it's easy to pull on, put your finger through it, and then just with your finger, try not like doing it in a mirror. You kind of want to look, but it doesn't make any sense to look. It's all by feel, so just have them feel for that little, whether it's a round button, that little ledge, or a Kaplan hook, it's like a little bunny ear wing. You feel for it with your fingernail, and the elastic just slides right off it onto the hook, and they
Mhm.
get it. They might. That's the most frustrating for me because again, chair time. I'm like, come
Come
on,
on.
come on, and
Yes,
it doesn't
yes.
help them if I get in there and do it again. My fingers, I've done it thousands of times. I am not
Mhm.
helping them.
Yeah.
And if they're really struggling, I just say, you know what? Don't worry about it. This is everyone does this. Don't get discouraged. Take the first few days, do it as much as you can. But if you're in the middle of school, especially school, right? Or work,
Yes.
like
Yes.
whatever,
Yes.
adults who are at work. If you're struggling, don't worry about it. Eventually, yes, you need to be wearing these 24/7. So within a week, I want you to get there. But if in the first days, if at school you are,
Preach.
yeah, so stressed out, calm down, because the last thing you want is them to call and say, I can't do it. I
Yeah.
can't do it, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kelly, this is like such a key thing. I don't know that I've ever really talked about it that much in any of the courses or any of our previous podcasts. But everything you just said there, I'm just like, preach it. Because that's such a key thing is that there's a lot going on at this first appointment. And
Mm-hmm.
so for patients to not get frustrated and want to quit within that
Mm-hmm.
first week because their standards are too high almost, that they're like, I couldn't get
Yes.
my elastics in. And like parents coming back saying that their child cried all day because they couldn't get their elastics in at school. And you're like, oh God, this is like such a minor thing. Like they will get
Yeah.
it for sure. By the end of like 1 week, they'll have it. But exactly what Kelly said, tell them this is not a big deal. If they can't get it on their own at school or they're struggling a lot, practice at home. If you
Mm-hmm.
haven't figured it out within a week, then we'll bring you back in and we'll practice more in person. But like
Mm-hmm.
95% of the time, they get it figured out. But a lot of times they don't get it figured out that first day or the second day or the third day.
No.
And so just making sure that they understand that they're not failing in treatment, that this isn't something that means that like they're going to get in trouble. We used to have so many calling us with like tears and frustrated parents saying how much they hated Invisalign or braces just because they couldn't get
Mm-hmm.
elastics on. Once we kind of made sure to hit that point before they left, that it's
Yeah.
like practice, do the best that you can. I'm confident you're going to get it. But if you don't, we'll see you in a week. Just give us a phone
Yes.
call if you're struggling still.
And like the first day, I mean, their saliva is on overdrive because the taste of that etch, and there's something new in their mouth, so that like they think they're eating, their brain thinks they're eating. So it's very slippery, more slippery than it's going to be in a few days. and they don't know where these things are. You've glued them, you've seen them a million times, or we've
Yeah.
seen them a million times, but they don't know where they are. And your natural habit is to open your mouth really wide to get there, which doesn't help because now you're stretching the elastic like 4 times its, length. So it's just, it is a struggle. And even getting them out. So, but same thing. You just say, you're going to get this. If anything, it's
Totally.
stuck in there, eat with it in, drink with it. Like the world's not going to end. So just,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
everyone
Get
just,
get comfortable for the first week, and then we'll go from there. Yeah. Exactly.
exactly. So I think, yeah, most people really do really well with that. At that point, we walk through like their magical kit with them. I love it's a really good experience. Everyone loves a loot bag, so it's a really good experience on that
Yeah.
first delivery day. Of course, you're giving them their aligners. That's a little less wow, but whatever. And when
Yeah.
they see those stacks of that comprehensive case, they feel like they got their $7,000 worth.
Yeah. Totally. That's true.
And then we already have prepared, we have them in our storage room already lined up. We don't do that chairside either. We're a little bit overkill, but again, this is something we itemize on their new patient, their document that they've signed, that where they're paying, like all the things that we're including. So their retainers, Oral-B offers amazing ortho packages that are like electric toothbrushes and all the fixings. It's a whole gathered package that is a really good value. I mean, even if you're not doing ortho and you sold that in your front office, you can make a little bit of money on that, and it's a good value. So we give them like, and even if they're in aligners, for sure, we give them an electric toothbrush. We give them an extra attachment that actually they could brush their aligners with. That's a little overkill, but whatever. We give them a travel toothbrush. We give them a full size rinse with a little bit of a daily fluoride. Again, if they're anti-fluoride, don't take it.
Yeah.
We just give everything to them. We don't make our kids or adults brush during the day at school. They don't even have time to eat at school these days. We just say rinse with water. So we give them a branded water bottle. The kids get a branded, those little cinch
Yeah. The cinch
sacks.
backpack. Oh,
Again,
that's
gym class,
smart.
we want you to know where you're getting your treatment. These things
Yeah.
all cost like nothing. They're
Yeah. They're
all very
cheap.
inexpensive. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
Nail file, we just tell them if something's really bothering you in the first few days, go ahead. I mean, I don't dwell on that because really that's just an adjustment period. Same with the attachments. I don't know if, for those of us who've had aligner therapy, the attachments, even though they look really glossy and slippery, they feel gravelly that first day to your
Mhm.
lips and cheeks. And if you've had IPR, sometimes those margins feel edgy because, I mean, my orthodontists don't go in with polishing strips and polish those off. That we just wear those suckers down. But I remember for myself thinking, woo, like sharp edges and whatever. And again, those go away. So I let the patients know, hey, that's normal. I know it feels crazy right now. You might even get a little ulcer here or there, but it's nothing like brackets. Brackets
Yeah.
and wires are 1,000 times worse. So within a few days, you're not even going to notice these, which is a true fact. It's not that you just get used to them. They actually smooth down a bit. And then also a great thing to let the patients know is that first couple days in those aligners, well, first weeks really, they're only hitting on their back molars. Only their second molars touch, which is a really weird feeling for them. There's 2 layers of plastic between their teeth. So I tell them right now, you feel like you can only touch your back teeth. That's going to settle over time and still be weird because you have plastic between your teeth, but it'll become the new normal.
Hmm.
When we finish treatment, you're going to only feel like your front teeth touch, and you'll be wondering, why don't any of my back teeth touch? Also normal.
Yeah.
Also, we will fix that, like, settling, but I'm setting them up for success. They'll remember that I said that,
Hmm.
and that all of these things, when they're going home thinking, do they know what they're doing or whatever,
Yeah.
so just kind
Totally.
of set them up. Mhm.
Yeah, man, I love these sessions with you, Kelly, because like I'm learning things too where I'm like, that's so smart to give them the branded backpack string bags because they're cheap and they're great branding.
Mhm.
Yeah, we're similar. We have all our like swag bags set up and things that we give. I am a little different. I give them 3 travel toothbrushes. I used to give them
Oh,
one, and then because I kept getting this answer from kids like, "Why aren't you taking care of your teeth?" I'd be like, "Well, I don't have a
yeah,
toothbrush when I'm away from the house." So then I was just like, "I'm gonna give they're $1 each. I'm like, here's 3 of them. I'll even give
yeah,
kids like 5.
yeah,
Anytime you come in and you want a travel toothbrush, here you go.
yeah,
We give them out like candy. We have a little nail file that we just bought on Amazon, just like a paper nail file. And we bought 1,000 for like $10. So we give them a nail file to say they can file down the edge of the trays if it's a bit rough to their lip. We give them chewy, munchy, or the new one that's just at the market is called a crunchy.
Okay.
I am cheap, so I didn't use munchies because they're like $8 a munchie. And so
Hmm.
really what I feel like you need with an aligner cedar, like something that they can bite down and chew on. So for anybody who doesn't know, a chewy, munchy, or crunchy is just a little silicone uh, like thing, I guess. Think of like a highlighter. A chewy is like the back of a highlighter cap, where you can
Yeah.
go ahead and just bite down, and it pushes the aligners to fit better by pushing them over the attachments if things aren't fitting as tight as you want them to.
Right.
The munchie then was created, and the munchie has like little grooves that you can bite into, and now a crunchy is like $2.50, $3, something like that.
Hmm.
It's sold through the Air Institute,
Hmm.
Jeff Skinner, and Terry Coddington. They are involved with kind of design and kind of finding these and getting them made with medical grade silicone. And Deirdre, if she's listening to this, I'll have to give her a shout out because that's where I heard they originally found them from. But essentially, it's just a cheaper version of an aligner cedar.
Hmm.
But we'll give them those. So we'll give them a couple crunchies or chewies at this point. And then we give them some toothpaste. And I like what you said about giving them some mouthwash. That's nice.
Hmm.
But yeah, so we give them their swag
Yeah,
bag.
like those are things that could like definitely if especially if they've gone for a second opinion and
Yeah.
you've like listed this out. I mean, you've listed out the like you're really listing things and you're just like, wow, it's like
We give you
almost the same
all of
money, but I
this.
get all of this. It's just
Yeah.
added value. I just think that's why not?
Yeah.
Why not
Why
do
not?
that?
Yeah. List it
Yeah,
all on the invoice when you tell them what's included. Yeah, my good friend
exactly.
Peter Braun out of Vancouver, he does the same thing. We don't, but he lists kind of all the different things like enamel, like recontouring.
Yeah.
He lists that's on the actual like what's included in the invoice, and then yeah, patients just see all the things that they get that are beyond just straightening the teeth.
Okay, awesome.
So we're probably getting
That's
close to the end here. I know I need to
yeah.
go feed Claire some lunch and put her down for a nap soon. But how are we doing for our list?
Yeah, no, we're pretty much done. When you were saying filing, it just led me to one point. Do not, if your patient says they're biting on their attachment or the attachment feels rough, file that under any circumstances. I mean, not any circumstances, but especially if you're a beginner, leave it be. They'll get used to it. It is not an issue with their aligners, and they're not going to feel it. And it's edgy for a reason. That you
Yeah,
don't,
don't
especially tell
file
your
the
team
sharpness
that
down.
you don't want your team rounding things.
Yeah, although I will say one thing that we do at our office. So,
Yep.
yeah, you don't want to like take off the sharp edges of the aligners on the gingival surface because that's where the trays snap into.
Mhm.
I'm doing and unfortunately Kelly can't be there for this one, but Terry Coddington and I are doing an attachments webinar coming up, and we're going to talk about attachment design. But one, this is a little off topic, but the gingival surface of the attachments is where the tray snaps onto, which makes sense because when you're trying to remove the tray from the mouth, what's preventing it from lifting up? The gingival aspect. And so the occlusal aspect of most attachments does not have that much value to them. And that's why when you actually look at Align's attachments, usually for the optimized ones that they put on, if you look at the ClinCheck and you see how the occlusal part of the attachment is kind of like smoothed into like a tapering,
Sloped away.
it's
Yeah.
sloped away. And then the gingival part though is where it's got kind of like crisp flat edge. And so if someone is biting on their attachment, normally I agree with Kelly, it's just like you're going to get used to it. The things that we do orthodontically with brackets and wires, with like putting blue glue on the molars and propping open their
Hmm.
bite, there's so many worse things than biting on an attachment. But if you have a really particular patient, you could go ahead and you can smooth on the occlusal aspect of that attachment, but you don't want to go in there and just be like smoothing off all the sharp edges of the
Or the
attachment.
buckle, like, because
Yeah,
if it's a tipping attachment, like
yeah,
if you're
if it's a
reducing the
vertical
size of
attachment,
it,
yeah, it's not going to fit in the aligner, and then the interface is wrecked, and the plastic won't push properly against that attachment to make the movement occur.
yeah. So
So
just think about it before you do
yeah,
it.
it's important to understand the attachment design and the biomechanics of what you're trying to accomplish. So And
Exactly.
yeah, that's very important.
Awesome. So if we're wrapping up this appointment, again, we're kind of probably reiterating to the patient that like we're in a partnership. We need you to do your part. We both have a video that we have usually pre-sent out to this new patient, so they could watch it even before this appointment. We have one of even what to expect at your first appointment. So that tray walkthrough, I don't expect everyone's watched these things, but it helps kids who have anxiety as well, or teens or adults who have anxiety, what's happening. So they can watch what to expect that first visit. Of course, we have them for elastics. We have them for everything. But important is the instructions of care. And so, but you still need to go over that. So we won't go over it here. But again, just, the wearing them 24/7.
Yeah.
Again, the chewies, fantastic, especially if they're not fitting and they have like active, we have active areas of the aligner. So it makes sense to seat those. But honestly, the back of your toothbrush is bouncy. It's kind of like, it's bouncy, right? Most people have like a comfort
even
handle.
like chew, you can cut up. So if you want to be real cheap, you can cut up suction tips, just like the saliva ejector suction
wooden
tips.
soft chopsticks, disposable chopsticks. Yeah. Like honestly, get those branded.
Yeah,
soft wood.
Yeah, even something that's not soft, in my opinion, like it's just something to push the aligner over the attachments. Yeah. Like I've told patients that they're out of town, they live 5 hours away. I'll just tell them like bite on the back of a pen. Just like chew on something just to push the liner up over the attachment. That's really all the chewies and munchies are doing.
Because we used to give out like even just the chewies, like hotcakes, and then people would just keep asking because it's something we love free things. We're just ridiculous people, and so you just keep asking for these things, whether you're using them or not. And only we know how expensive they are. And honestly, if they're wearing their aligners all the time, there's very little need for a cedar. It's just we're not perfect as humans.
You shouldn't really.
I never used a chewy, and I clench, so maybe that's so anyways, video instructions, but do go over them briefly with them so that you've covered both bases in case they never watch that. And then most of us would pre-book their next appointment. I tend to already have it mapped out their whole life. So I pre-book their next 2 appointments. So if we're checking them in, let's just pay like we really trust people and we've been doing it a long time. But let's say we see them in 8 weeks or 12 weeks. I would book those 2 next visits. And we kind of pair our visits. Every time we have like a refinement scan, we've already pre-booked 4 weeks later their insert. It could be a short insert if we expect no attachments or no IPR, or it could be slightly longer, not that long because there's not too much work to do, but let's say it's 20-minute where we have to add an attachment or something. But we always have a scan booked with an appointment. A new patient exam, we've pre-booked their appointment. We are already guaranteeing ourselves we're selling that case. And if we don't, it leaves a gap in the schedule that's pre-reserved for a debond or a same-day start or something like that. So we just like to block those out because our schedule gets so tight and we don't want someone to call up and we can't get them in because we really have no space. And then most importantly, I would say is charting. So we have preset, I mean, Dr. Schalk is like the expert at this. He's very next level with his text edit or a text expander situations. In our software, we have preset protocols where basically we just tick boxes. So initial bonding appointment, etch, like prophy etch, blah, 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 all the things that I would type as a clinician that I did this stuff. We just tick boxes and it auto populates. So your text expander would be the same thing. And it expands in a perfect bonding procedure. I did all of this stuff. And then I can just add in my little notes, like patient was a pain in the butt and it was a lot of saliva or whatever, or couldn't bond to the porcelain crown, leave it, that type of thing. And also keynotes, IPR in particular. Did you do it? Did you not do it? Sometimes the doctor will do half of it. Why?
Yeah.
They get tired.
Don't do all your IPR properly. Yeah, in my opinion.
So really good charting so that the next person who sees the patient is on board with what happened there. Or if they really were struggling with elastics, just a little, and again, if all this is preset, that just wraps up that appointment really, really nicely. Good luck patient, call us if you need us. Usually they don't call. Usually everything's awesome.
Yeah. And ours is a little different again, because I mean, this is kind of the beauty of some of the tech that we use nowadays. Like we're on dental monitoring, which means that patients are doing cell phone scans every week, just using the app, the dental monitoring app. They take a little video of their teeth. We have access to see how the trays are fitting, and it will send us notifications if the patient's trays aren't fitting properly. If they're fitting properly, a message that we've created and we have in a template automatically gets sent out to them telling them what the next step is. And so there's a lot of artificial intelligence going on in the background. So we only get notified when things aren't fitting properly. So what we found as an office is like we don't really need to pre-book because we have so much available room, because we'll be finishing these very complex cases sometimes with only maybe like 5 in-office visits. So because we've removed a lot of the check appointments where we just pat them on the head and say, good job. Instead now those are getting cut out and we don't need that chair time anymore. So every practice is going to be different in terms of how you run things. And the dental monitoring is for sure a more kind of advanced, in-depth system that you have to use. But yes, I think Kelly is right in that if you are just starting off and you want to keep it very clear and clean and not forget things, pre-book them. And that's just going to ensure that everything stays on track. And then as you get more systematic in how you approach things and you kind of get the feel for it, then you might continue doing that, or you might realize that there's other ways that you can do it. And again, the beauty of the courses online or the ones that we teach in person is that we're going to go through lots of different philosophies, different methods that you can use. Because as Richard Litt always said, if you learn from one person, you've gotten training. If you learn multiple approaches from different people, you've got an education. So we want to give you guys a full education with lots of different ways to do it.
Exactly. Awesome. So yeah, we've got delivery under our belts.
Nice.
Maybe the next one will be monitoring, a combo of monitoring in that first visit back, because you're kind of glazed over, like, what am I looking for?
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Well, nice chatting with you, Kelly.
Okay. Yeah. Enjoy your Friday.
You too.
All right. Give Claire a kiss for us.
I will. Absolutely. Okay.
Okay.
Bye.